Good evening and welcome to episode 36 of Let's Talk Possibility. It is Monday night, the 11th of June, and tonight we're talking with Robin Wheeler about being yourself for a living. We want to explore what is possible in terms of life, in terms of business, in terms of success, when you let go of what everyone else's expectations of you are and truly find your purpose in doing what it is that you want to do. Right, good evening. It is Monday night, the 11th of June. It's Let's Talk Possibility, and tonight with me, Eric Vermeulen. Talana, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Great to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. It's bloody freezing in South Africa, but we're going to warm things up in studio a little bit and talk about something that probably we don't think about all the time. And that is, I think so often we end up being caught up in doing things in life, in business, that other people want us to do or that other people expect us to do. And I know, Talana, I told you I was going to ask you this question, but I mean, what did your parents expect you to be or do when you grew up?
I know they definitely expected me to go to university. It was a big push in our family. And I seem to remember them always asking me, what is it I wanted to do? And I always wanted to be a doctor. I'm nowhere near being a doctor right now. And I don't even want to be a doctor anymore. But that was like growing up, what I remember is always the question asked. I would always say doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is why tonight we've got Robin Wheeler in studio. And Robin, welcome.
Thanks, Eric.
Robin Wheeler has been in a rock band. He's written several best-selling books, and he takes regular sojourns to Southeast Asia to discover what it is like being yourself for a living. Robin, that's really your main, shall we call it, discovery about living a better life, being yourself.
It's very insightful, Eric, because it's my branding, being yourself for a living, but and in that it's what I teach people, but inherent in me teaching it is having to discover it. It's my journey primarily, and has been, like you say, for 16 or so years. So the more I go into this idea of being yourself for a living as an optimal way to thrive in the new economy, the more I'm discovering myself. So the journey just opens up more and more.
Yeah, and so obviously you found yourself at some point in life where you felt you were doing something for the reasons, not for your own reason, but for other people's reasons.
Right, yeah. Look, I think on one level that's, you have to kind of do that, you know. Society sets you up, and it's almost impossible for parents to kind of not expect their kids to function and do well, and it's kind of how parents love their kids, you know. So we all got to kind of experience who we're not, go out there and discover who you're not as part of discovering who you are. And I definitely had that. I was working in the corporate world and doing well on paper, you know, getting promoted and kind of looked like I was doing well, but my inner knowing just kind of wasn't impressed with me at all and just said to me, you've got to change direction, which I did and started out on my own, and that's where the journey really shifted into gear, you know.
So, I mean, did you find that when you were not being yourself, that you were under a lot of emotional stress, that
Yes.
there was almost a disconnect?
I was depressed. I was really just trying to survive, you know. I didn't know who I was, and I was trying to live this false life. And the more energy that took from me to kind of uphold it, the more hollow I felt inside. And that's literally what happened, is that my body just said to me, okay, don't keep fighting with yourself anymore. Choose what you really want to do. And I was 27 years old, so in a way it was the best time because I was naive and prepared to take a big risk and just go out there and see. But on another level it was difficult because I didn't have any skills that I felt were kind of established enough or consolidated enough to say, okay, I am this thing. I am a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. I had an education and I had experience, but I had to decide for myself what I was. And to go and put yourself out there as a brand and your own name is a massive step towards being an entrepreneur is a much more, in a way, responsible way of living. You know, you don't live on the receiving end of a structure and a system. You go and innovate. And to me, it's a growing up, but it comes the hard way. You know, you learn the difficult lessons through it.
Yeah, I mean, what was that big catalyst, apart from being depressed, as you said?
Well, my body just refused to go to work, you know. One day I just started feeling dizzy at work, and I lay down on the office floor, and I went from this 27-year-old vibrant guy that strode around avoiding any work to this guy who couldn't move. And they took me downstairs in a wheelchair, which was a bit of a shock to the ego. And I lay in the sort of sick bay at the corporate head office. And if I relaxed, I was fine. But as soon as I decided, okay, I'm going to go back to work, my body just said no. And I went home to rest, and I went to doctors, and they said I was in perfect health. But every time I tried to go against myself, my body just started getting these symptoms, like where I'd feel dizzy and faint. And so I just started to stop. Initially, all I could do was stop going against myself. But then the more I went into that, and I realized, okay, let me just listen to my inner knowing. There's something inside me that's, if not more so, at least as convincing as this outer argument for conforming or fitting in or living up to expectation. And then when I started listening to that inner truth, then it started to guide me in the direction towards what I came to call being myself for a living. But that journey continues, because I was very excited when you invited me to talk about this, because it's not something I worked out back then and repeat to everybody. It's something very much alive for me right now. It's like, who am I? And how do I bring that into the world in a creative way that satisfies me and that is of service to people and works as a business?
Yeah.
So how did you go on that journey then of finding who you are? Because I think a lot of us, like I said, it was almost like I was going to become a doctor, and that was who I was.
Yes.
Whereas I know myself now, that is just an expression. It's something that we do. So how did you go on that process then of finding out who you are?
Well, I'd studied psychology, which is pretty kind of awareness promoting. It was in a way a kind of substitute for a spiritual journey. For the first 10 years, from about late standard 9 into my late 20s, so for about 10 years, psychology was the way I understood my kind of purpose in life, is to become a psychologist, and that's what I pursued. And then I studied clinical and counseling and organizational psychology, and worked in the corporate world and worked in the kind of counseling field. So I got all of that background, and my friends were psychologists, and I talked about all those things, like who we are. And so that journey was already going. And then when I went out on my own, that's when I really started to look in my own sort of authority at what my vision was for my own life and for the world and that sort of thing. And in that, I just started with what I was good at and what I enjoyed and what skills I had and who I knew myself to be at the time. I think that's one of the steps, is you realize, hang on, I've got to do this thing. The world's changing, I'm changing. This might be circumstantial pressure, it might be inspiration or desperation, but either way you realize I've got to do it. Then you start heading towards it, and you start where you're at. And part of that is realizing that where you're at is the perfect place to be. Because the part of that coming to terms with yourself, or kind of overcoming the war in yourself, is that you stop doubting whether you've done the right thing or not, or because you're constantly evaluating yourself against these expectations. But then when you get past that and you realize, look, I'm just going to be me and see where that takes me, then you start to, through experience and also through the process of solitude and spending time with yourself, which most entrepreneurs end up doing because you learn the lessons the hard way, So it's a mixture of all of those things. But it is at the center of my life, is just my kind of deep interest in being true to myself.
Because, I really like what you say there about inspiration versus desperation. And I think we all get to some point in life where desperation actually serves as the inspiration to become
it
yourself
propels
for a
us
living.
to do something else.
You end up slogging away at what other people expect you to do, until you get to a point where you literally can't do it anymore.
Exactly.
And only in that depth of wallowing where you don't want to be do you find the inspiration to move forward.
Exactly. I relate fully to that.
So then, Robin, how do you then find a way to pack away the status, to pack away the ego, and to then do something purposeful?
It's a big challenge, that. One way is to kind of almost boost your ego a little bit and say, well, I was this person with this status and this thing. Now I'm going to be even better. So kind of have aspirations and head out to be a better person. And I think that does work to a degree. It might get you through certain tough patches or whatever, or it might get you going. But the real journey is in kind of discovering that all of that egoic stuff isn't real, and it's just fraught with stress and strife, and it's not a sustainable way of living in yourself. So you start to kind of, again, go into who you really are, you know, that deeper journey of discovery. But it's difficult. And I mean, I've just watched all my friends from school going into senior positions in companies, and when I was kind of not even sure what I was doing some of the time, or, you know, just following an intuition that wasn't paying me in the proportion to which it was inspiring me. You know, it was giving me 2.5 million rand a month. I would have thought, oh, well, that's in keeping with how I feel. This is really powerful. I was being driven from within in this intensely inspired way. But to kind of get that to work in the world is a challenge, you know. And you've got to use what you're known for and what you've got to start, and then you've got to work towards what you're feeling your intuitive vision is, and you've got to learn, and then you've got to find ways to sort of manage that oscillation that happens on one level. You know, you've got ups and downs and the duality of life, but then there's something deeper behind that keeps you going on the right track.
So with it, obviously dealing with oscillations and then not earning. You gave the example of what your peers might have been earning. How else did you manage though with following, you know, just being you and doing what you felt was true to you when there's all these outside expectations? Because I know when I started my business, I had some of my loved ones come and they tried everything to get me to go lecture,
right?
And you know, just do the coaching on the side or do this. And I'm like, no, I can't not do what I know I need to do. So how did you manage that other, you know, people close to you having different expectations of you?
Sometimes the people closest to you can be the most difficult to overcome because they love you and they also very stuck in certain relational patterns or expectations. So sort of on a spiritual level, it's almost as if the people closest to you are your enemies in a way, because they struggle perhaps to see or support your vision. You just got to push through that, as far as I can remember, really, you know. You're going into a new level of awareness all the time, so you're kind of dropping away what isn't real. But you usually do that with some difficulty, so it's a challenge.
But isn't also when you really want to do something, it's almost like life sends you someone or something to challenge you. It's like, do you really want to do this?
Exactly.
Because if you don't really want to do it, then when the challenge comes, it's like, oh, no, I'll just go do something else.
And linking onto that, Talon, I think it's about where you place that locus of control. You know, I think often we come across something and we tell ourselves that we really want to do this, but we really want to do it to get approval from outside or to keep our parents happy or our wife happy. And whereas when we find something that we want to do, and that locus of control is purely within, and we do things purely for our own reasons and not for others, I think that's a big step towards being yourself.
And like I say, I mean, I can't tell you how many of those big steps I've had on the way, many, you know, dozens. But sort of 18 months ago, I was in Thailand. I discovered the place and fallen in love with it and started spending more and more time there. On the one hand, just I started writing there, and it was productive in a certain way, creative way, but it was also, I was quite burnt out. You know, I'd been in business 15 years, and you tend to just overwork. And when you're making a living out of your creative output, it's like, when in doubt, give more. You know, really giving your heart and your soul and your life. And then when things get stressful, you double give instead of being able to take something back for yourself. Yeah. So I was in Thailand, burnt out, essentially kind of, it was had compounded over a few years. And I couldn't really take the time and say, let me take 2 months off. 2 months off had to kind of take me. And when I was there, it was literally like living a simple monastic life, a little basic room, just me.
Yeah.
No pressures, no house to run even, like really, really essential. And then I'd just go and swim at sunset every night. And I could see the process, even in the water, with this magnificent vista from horizon to horizon, and the sun going down and the sky being all these shades of magnificence. It would take me sometimes an hour of treading water to literally feel my mind settling down. And it had only been 24 hours since I was last in the water, you know, and your mind fills up when you sleep, all your dreams, your thinking, that's the way we're conditioned. So then I would find my mind would settle down and I could start to see literally in that ocean, in that solitude, what voice inside me was there and what it was saying. And I had to let the other stuff die down. And this is now a year ago.
Yeah.
I've been in business 15 years. So that's what I'm saying. It's the more you go into the mystery, the more the mystery reveals itself to being mysterious. You know, it's not it's not on the level of content where there's information that you learn and it's really digging into who you are, you know. So, and then managing that practical thing where you constantly have got to, for me, the answer on a practical level is to have a number of endeavors. You're like a multipreneur. And each of those has a different purpose. Only one of those might be paying your bills. You might be covering your overheads with your coaching or your speaking or your maybe some consulting work based on your previous job. But you're exploring all those talents and they start to weave in. And like, for example, you mentioned the music. I only started drumming at 34. I'd given up on that. And again, it was a story of it was almost like my soul, or my spirit, or my inner me was saying to me, you must go and make music, and I wasn't listening. So eventually, because I didn't know where to start, but eventually I started, and that became a big part of my life. And now I've combined that with my professional speaking. So I'm the only speaker on the circuit who's got a band that demonstrates the point afterwards. But that's how, if you explore those things, they weave together.
And is that what you mean by saying being yourself for a living? Is finding what is within you, your strengths, what you enjoy doing, what you've been called to do, and then finding a way to make that a viable way of consulting or... So what about people
I was reading
say...
a book about a year and a half ago, 18 months, that I left on a plane and never saw again. The book is called Multiplicity. What I loved about it is how the author actually makes the statement that says, even though when you take it too far, this whole multiple personality issue becomes unhealthy and dangerous. But yet, there is a very healthy and sane level of having these multiple personas, where, you know, Robin, you've got your speaking, you've got your prolific author, your music. And when we find these little bits of ourselves, it almost becomes self-calming and it just creates balance within life. I mean, out in Thailand, you haven't considered taking up martial arts or Muay Thai or anything?
No. I've always done things my own way, you know. I think that's one of the things that I was fortunate. My parents also, you know, had expectations of me. My father was a professional man. He was very proud of being able to educate his kids, and he expected that they go to university because it was prudent, but also because he wanted us, it was an act of love on his part to send us to university because he'd seen the value in life and to himself. But my parents were also very liberal in a way, you know, very understanding and allowed me a lot of freedom in a sense, which I'm very grateful for because it just made their life easier. Jokes aside, I mean, I would have asserted it anyway because I think we've all got this thing in us, a certain knowing that when the chips are down, you know, and there might be a certain circumstance that seems profoundly desperate. But in my desperate times as an entrepreneur, when I've really had times like where I did not eat dinner because all the money I had all my 5 Rand coins in my money box I'd used for dinner the night before.
And then the rest you squandered on fuel and heat.
Those times, Eric. Those difficult moments, like because I'd followed my truth, I was still able to say to life, well, all I can do is go more into this. It's not a debate of, I'm not weighing up options. This is like a deeper truth that I've followed. So that when it got tough, all I could do was follow that truth more, which at the time felt a very desperate struggle to be going through. But then when you go through that barrier, a whole new horizon reveals itself to you.
Because you're almost going against conventional thinking, where conventional
Very
thinking
much
would
so.
say, you know, one step forward, when it doesn't work, when it doesn't feel right, you take a step back, and you're saying, no, just keep taking another step forward. And it is in the depth of discovery and in the depth of yourself that you find who you really are.
Yes.
So my question is going to be for someone who's in corporate world, who's got a job, and that is, that they don't have the yearning to maybe do something on their own. How would they then be true to themselves for a living?
It's just a shift in awareness, really, and I think we overemphasize whether you work for someone or don't, or whether you've got your own business or don't. I try and take the emphasis off that, because, again, it's an external emphasis. I say to people, wherever you are is the right place, and being yourself for a living is a state of being. It's not an environmentally determined thing. Yeah. So you might be in the right place. You might leave that job this instant when you realize you want to do something else. Or
you might be at home raising children.
Whatever that
wherever
situation.
It is. It's more a state of mind.
Yes, it's a state of being. And the way really, in my talks, for example, I persuade people of what they really know. That's the process, because our conditioning is in the mind, and we're defining ourselves in the mind based on how the world has told us the world works. So that's a false thing. It's not the truth that you've experienced for yourself. It's all borrowed. It's borrowed knowledge. So you've got to strip away the false as part of this process. But you've got to come to terms with being in the right place at the right time and being yourself. So you kind of shift to... For me, it's this being yourself for a living is a more aware way of being. It's more mindful, it's more conscious, it's more creative, it's more responsive. Now, all of these things are what companies need from their staff. You need to be able to engage mindfully with customers, because every customer is different. And the commodity that you're trading is a ethereal thing. It's a human thing. It's relationships. It's innovation. So the companies need people to become more conscious. They just don't know how to actually do that for real. It's one thing to talk about it. Like you're going, okay, we're going from a structured employee approach to an organic entrepreneurial approach. But they still give you that instruction from above. Yeah. So they haven't, there's an incongruence between the spoken word and the action in a company. And if you can get those congruent, then an energy moves through, and you go onto a whole new level as an individual and as a company. So that's what I do, is I help people get out of their own way so that energy can move through.
And the classic example of how companies are getting that wrong, I think, is the outbound call centers. I had another one of those calls today.
Oh, those calls.
And she's reading the script, and she can barely read the script. So in order to do that better, is exactly what you're saying. If the lady who phoned me was being herself and not the call center agent that she was trained to do, and all she would then need would be the core of that message, and she strings along, exactly. and she kind of colors it in herself, as long as she gets the core of the message.
Says it with her words.
Yeah, and now she's bound by the script, which isn't hers. It's not who she is, and so immediately it comes across as fake, plastic, and I'm just not going to buy that product.
And offensive to a vaguely intelligent customer, It's an insult to everybody. It's an insult to the staff member, to the customer. So when you get a good customer like yourself, you're a potentially sophisticated client. All she needed to be was herself, and she would have turned that into a positive experience. But now they offend good customers, intelligent people who have huge numbers of followers that they go and tell about it. So, and then that perpetuates. The company then becomes more subversive to try and stimulate business instead of more authentic. So it becomes more alienating to the people working there, and it spirals in the wrong direction. So I think the only solution is to find our own truths. It's an individual discovery wherever you are, and people need to sort of come into that and become leaders through that. So wherever you work, the people who are in leadership positions, so-called leadership positions in companies, if they do that, sooner or later what's going to happen is you start bringing a new approach to your work, but sooner or later you're going to have to assert that. You're going to be saying, look, the implications of this are going that way or this way, and this is how I see it, this is what I live, this is how I back it up. And sometimes the company says that's not what we need, and sometimes they say that's exactly what we need. But the entrepreneur in you has to sell it,
just being right or just knowing the answer isn't good enough. You've got to help people understand that, help them make this decision, help them put a budget to it, help them see the project through. You need a lot of resources, and you're a leader. When you're being yourself, you become a leader because you start showing other people how to be themselves.
It's almost like you give them permission by giving yourself permission.
So it's one thing for Mandela to quote somebody and say, by bringing your light into the world, you give other people permission. But it's a whole different story for each and every individual to go and actually do that with their life.
Yeah.
Robin, we've got a question, Robin, coming in on the chat.
From Chris.
Which says, have we forgotten how to be ourselves? And have we started to think that the persona we create for ourselves is who we really are?
Definitely. I don't think people know who they are.
I think we're so bombarded, though. The media tells us who we should be. Education tells us the way we should be thinking.
Exactly.
Parents are telling us, our friends are telling us, our colleagues.
HR tells us how we should behave.
It's like all of these rules and.
Yeah, and I think for the female listeners, I think it's probably even more obtrusive or intrusive, because how often aren't women told through advertising, through marketing, how they should look, what they should wear.
And if you don't look that, then something wrong with you.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, I think what that then leads to is that we end up comparing ourselves with others.
Yeah.
And so we build our whole persona around my environment and other people. And maybe, Robin, what you're saying is that in order to be yourself for a living, you should rather just try and exceed your own expectation of yourself and not other people's expectations.
Sure. Look, I mean, I think we're all going to find the way you're describing it is something for you that works for you. And I think each individual is going to find their own way into this thing we call ourselves. For me, I can describe quite distinct experiences in myself. Like I can feel when I start thinking fearfully. I'll catch myself. Like my whole being, my whole kind of presence will start to feel a certain way. I'll have certain emotions. I'll start to chew on certain thoughts. I'll start to have certain conversations.
Muscle tension.
Breathing shallows. Everything just goes the wrong color, and then you realize, hang on, because what happens there is you've identified with ego and you're comparing, and behind that are your insecurities, and you're just spiraling out of control. So I'll see that I've done that. I'll see, I'm thinking now. So I'll come back to not thinking, which I've developed the capacity to do because it's taken me 15 years to do that. So it's difficult to tell you exactly how. Each guy has got his own thing. But it is that process of coming, what is the real me and what is its relationship with the world through these different things? I can see, I can smell, I can think. So you become more aware. You're not just your five senses. You're being. You become much more attuned to your emotions, and you can see how they relate to your thinking and how your patterns are there. So you're becoming more and more conscious all the way. That's the journey of inwards is the consciousness. And then the journey outwards is love, really. I mean, if you had to simplify it, because you've got so much to give and so much to share that I'll share it anyway. I've got a new book lined up to put out. So if I think about it too much, I might talk myself out of it. But if I think of dying without putting it out, it's a no-brainer. The book's coming out. And when you do that, when you start to move into that realm of trusting that feeling of inspiration and joy and excitement and using your acumen, I'm a businessman, I'm in my 40s, I know what I'm doing on one level. I can use that I orchestrate things, I bring people together, things happen. And then I realize, okay, so you've got to almost, that tenacity of a flower born in the cracks between rocks and overcoming, that flower is more beautiful and more colorful and more fragrant than any other flower. So if you're up for the journey, because being yourself reveals to you what that means more and more and more. We don't know who we are. We've been conditioned out of that, but you can find it.
Something I just thought of, also being yourself means you obviously got to get to know yourself, to know it. And so you've got a sense now of when you're off not being yourself, as you say, the fearful, the thoughts, the physiology. But isn't part of maybe our resistance to finding out who we are is because we don't like what we see sometimes. It's that dark side.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So have you found that? Have you had to then meet your dark side and make peace with
Yeah, well, it came
that
knocking.
part of you?
It was knocking everywhere. No, you definitely develop a relationship with your dark side and your fears and your just who you are. You know, I think we also, again, we live in this idealistic perception of ourselves. And if you want to awaken spiritually, the first thing you've got to be able to do is look at yourself in truth, not judging
That's
it in
all
any way.
aspects, yeah.
Like the way I use an example is, you know, in psychology and therapy, it's all time-based. You've got to go and sit and talk everything through and unpack your past. And then the more you unpack it, the more there is to unpack. And it just becomes sort of a computing nightmare. There's just so much data, you know. Conversely, the way to do it is actually like, if you cannot see it all right here, right now, it's irrelevant. It's like a flash of lightning. You can see that you're a violent person. I can see those things in myself. Like if I'm in traffic, I want to kill somebody. Just a red traffic light can evoke a feeling of strong emotion. So if I can watch that in myself, rather than judging the light and living my life out on that outer level, to see this thing has arisen in me and let me look at it without resisting it, making it wrong or making it desirable, either way.
Yeah.
Just
let it be.
And then that gap that's created in acceptance, that frees you up. You're no longer conditioned there. You can actually start to make a conscious response to something rather than a reactive, unconscious pattern thing. And there again, you're shifting into who you really are there. And that comes through in everything in your life. But it's a tough journey. It's really the spiritual journey. You know, and if I had to go back to my very early days of doing this, what I wanted to do was integrate ancient spiritual wisdom with the modern vernacular, music, culture, because it's all around us. And the people alive today are charged with becoming spiritually awakened in our world today. It's not about going to the Himalayas. And although I do go to Thailand, it's not about going to Thailand. It's about wherever you are, knowing yourself. And half of it is the solitary self-discovery, and the other half is the interactional self-discovery. It's not about either or, it's about an and. And the and is, again, a function of this higher awareness where you can live with contradictions without choosing one or the other. You know, the 20th century model of work was problem solutions, right or wrong. Now we're looking at right and wrong, black and white. Both coexist and they're both needed day and night. So the leader of today is more aware and is able to manage that creatively
and deal with that complexity.
Yes.
Fascinating stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
So if people want to get hold of you, Robin, what's the best way?
Probably my Twitter account, Robin Being. Be Entrepreneuring is my brand. It's got the word being in it, and that's the being yourself for a living. So Robin Being is on Twitter, or robin@robinwheeler.co.za is the email.
There we go, folks. We are just about out of time. Robin, thank you so much for
Thank you,
coming
guys.
in and chatting to us. And I think if we can summarize all of that into just one anecdote, it's when you read the births and the deaths column in any newspaper, you know, you always read, you never read about, you know, a 2.9 kilogram baby accountant born to Mr. and Mrs.
Yes. Who has a certain car. And
Yeah, no, you know, you just read about baby, you know, Robin being born. And that, I think, is the true meaning of what it is to be yourself for a living. Robin, thank you very much. Talana,
Thanks,
thank you
guys.
very much. And this was episode 36 of Let's Talk Possibility, where we had a chat with Robin Wheeler about being yourself for a living. Let's keep that conversation going. Interact with us on our website at...
Facebook's actually the best place.
Yeah,
Find us, Let's Talk Possibility on Facebook or Twitter, LT Possibility.
Thank you very much. Good night.